Hi everyone. The previous episode is still available just in case. Okay, yeah, that's probably better like to go this way. Um, yeah, and this is the continuation of the avenue, but for everyone, I'm giving this very quick recap of where we are in St. Petersburg and what is this English Avenue. That's the kind of the continuation of the English embankment that we have walked before. We saw a lot of splendid, opulent palaces on the embankment, and this is the area where historically a lot of embassies used to be located, and also different foreign specialists and engineers used to live because this area is exactly between two shipbuilding yards. So this is the kind of the modern shipbuilding yard that is second half of the 19th century shipbuilding yard, and the well where the embankment started, we spoke about it. There was an old, very first shipbuilding yard, and this area, which kind of formed the triangle of shipbuilding areas, is the New Holland Island, which we also have walked before. All these tours that I'm referring to, they're all available as recordings from my YouTube channel with this link that is provided to my supporters. And let's say if you are my supporter and you cannot find a certain tour, feel free to contact me. If you want to see one tour specifically and you are not my sponsor or supporter, you can always contact me and I can send you the link. And I always provide the links on how to become my supporter, my sponsor. I hate this word, but that's how it kind of sounds, right? That's how we put it and that's how we stick to it. So the information is over there on the chat as well. So this is the New Holland Island, the place where where the material for shipbuilding used to be stored. And in that triangle, a lot of shipbuilding engineers used to live. Also, workers lived in the other area not far from here. And this is the Moika River embankment. This to the right is the continuation of that late 19th century and also modern shipbuilding area. It's in like 10 minutes walk from here to the Nevsky Avenue, our, I would say, Fifth Avenue of St. Petersburg, but it doesn't feel like it and it's much wider. So the English Avenue is not the direct continuation, but this is something that kind of developed from the embankment. But if the embankment is the 18th century, the avenue is like mid 19th century, a little bit earlier. And yes, it's still quite, I would say, quite an expensive upscale neighborhood. It still is, and it was, and it's a long avenue, as you can see. It basically covers two islands, and it starts from the Moika River that we have just seen, right? You see this black line. It's in Russian. The map is in Russian, but it's not that relevant. What is relevant that you can see that the avenue crosses the English Canal. Oh, sorry, not the English. Why is it the English? How did I say that? I don't know. It's not an English channel. It's the St. Catherine's Canal or Griboyedov Canal, and then it goes up to the Fountain River to the right. So this is a long avenue, and we have explored about half of it, I would say, maybe a little bit less. So we are looking again at the Neva Moika River embankment, the modern shipbuilding yard, nothing really beautiful to see. And we continue from here. So we have walked past quite a lot of buildings. And last time we finished with the exploration of a monument and the apartment of Alexander Blok, my favorite poet of the so-called Silver Age of Russian literature, that is the turn of the 20th century and the period around the revolution. And we saw his apartment, which is a museum. There is a separate tour of the apartment and the tour focusing on Alexander Blok. The previous tour, we were more interested about how the life was, what the life was like, what the apartments looked like, and the Dostoevsky tours are going to be pretty much the same about how people lived, how Dostoevsky lived, his contemporaries, the characters of his novels. And this is pretty much, it's also the tour mostly about the not so touristy, not such, not, it's not this touristy in this area. And well, even before the pandemic and before the invasion to Ukraine, right, when St. Petersburg was one of the most popular travel destinations, this area was mostly for locals, and the tours that were offered in this area were mostly for St. Petersburgers themselves, and that's where St. Petersburgers would kind of get away from the tourist crowds, and many of the locals who lived and who live in the central area, they prefer to rent out their apartments. But that's how it used to be, so and would just escape somewhere to the countryside or travel. But this area was always very quiet, and it's mostly made up of this residential homes, income houses, right, where that belong to private entities or someone, right? Just some merchants or some military as well. In most cases, those would be for sure loans from the banks. But at that point, it's not the same as now. Well, mortgages 10%, 13%. Just imagine this, right? The interest rate. But back then it was 1 or 2% maximum, and it was a lot easier to take a loan, and that was a guarantee that this type of business would pay off for sure. There was only one thing that they couldn't foresee, that is the revolution and nationalization. Other than that, it was the perfect business plan, and that's why some people who would think, okay, how is this possible that this, well, like a mid-level official could afford to build a house like that? That was a loan from a bank, but um, within like 4 or 5 years, any investment of this kind, well, let's say an average house, could have been and would, well, normally would be easily paid off. Well, anyway, in this area, we mostly have buildings of let's say mid and late 19th century. And that's why we can always come, I would say often come across Art Nouveau, but also eclectic buildings. And well, this one is the very early example of, I would say, late eclectic period. And you see a lot of details from Art Nouveau, such as the ladies' heads, right? But originally, the building was much older. I found online this photo. What you see is a brick, the original brick from 1813. There's no way this building could have been, well, it was, there's no way this building was built in 1813. But many buildings used to be rebuilt, and the bricks, the good bricks in good conditions, would be taken and used for the second time or for the third time, depending on the situation. And that's one of those examples. And it's also interesting that in on the English Avenue and in general in this neighborhood used to live a lot of artistic people, a lot of artists, a lot of students, writers, and ballet dancers. Well, we saw the house where Anna Pavlova lived, and we even saw some photographs of her apartment and of her rehearsing in her own apartment. Also, in this building, for example, on English Avenue, used to live Václav Nijinsky, whom I'm sure you have heard of in connection with Diaghilev ballet season. So he was one of the stars of the Russian ballet seasons of Diaghilev. And about a year ago, I think I did a tour I did a series of tours on Diaghilev ballet seasons. And I did tours, if you remember, about specific dancers, male and female ballet dancers. So there was a tour about him, a very interesting personality. I would say with a tragic fate, but with an amazing story of success, I would say. So he used to live in this house for a short period of time, but that was very common because this area was not so far from the downtown, but it was still further and cheaper because of that. and now it's just almost as expensive as in the downtown per se. But this is considered the center. This is the center anyway. Whenever I can, I share with you old photographs from archives. This is from the Soviet period. I wasn't able to find older photographs. And also, I've discovered something interesting. Well, because in many cases, in neighborhoods like this, houses look average, more or less, like not something I would say too opulent or too extraordinary. But the stories of the people who lived in this house are, I would say, pretty impressive anyway. So this is the story. This specific case in this house. Well, Nijinsky is also interesting, but Nijinsky lived here for less than a year. But Vladimir Kippel used to live here for several years. Vladimir Kippel was a very high rank army general, and he was a military man from forever. He was born to be a military. He lived in this house together with his family, his wife, and his daughter. And when the First World War started, he obviously, and when Russia joined the war, he went to the front line and he fought in the Eastern Front, well, with Nicholas II and everyone. So he for sure was the supporter of the monarchy regime. And as you know, the First World War eventually led to the revolution, together, along with many other factors. We're not going into this. We have done a lot of tours about the revolution, but it still will never be enough. But anyway, and he joined the White Army because after the revolution, the country split into the White camp and the Red camp, right? So the Red Army supported the Bolsheviks, right? Supported communism eventually, and the White Army supported monarchy, or at least the provisional government and the constituent assembly that was supposed to get together in January 1918 to actually see what would happen next with the country, since the monarchy ceased to be. But as you know, Bolsheviks captured the country before the constituent assembly took place. And this is when the Civil War started. So there was the war between the red and the white. So Kippel for sure joined the White Army movement. And he already had been quite a distinguished military man that showed his courage in the First World War. And he continued in the already during the Civil War. And his name is very much connected to the story of the Golden Reserve of the Russian Empire. When the First World War started and Russia joined the war, the Golden Reserve was moved from St. Petersburg, which was the capital, to Moscow, and then from Moscow, it's gold, it's jewelry, it's cash, it's coins. It was moved deep into the country, into Siberia, because obviously Moscow and St. Petersburg, which was named Petrograd back then, right? There was no way the gold reserve would be intact. For sure, it would be the first thing that the enemy would capture, and it was decided by Nicholas. Just hold on a second. Someone's trying to join the tour. I'm going to send the direct link. I know it's sometimes challenging to access especially when when you're here for the first time. Okay, I hope this will help. So as you can see in the shelves over there, those are the gold bars. It was a lot of money. It was a lot of money, the gold reserve of the country. And back in the early 20th century, Russian economy was in a much better state than nowadays. So what actually was going on with the Russian gold reserve? So as I told you, it was a very good size of the gold reserve, one of the biggest in the world. So a part of the gold reserve was first evacuated from Petrograd to Moscow. But from there, and also as part of it was also on its way, it was eventually decided to move it deeper into the country and first into the town of Kazan, which is now it's it's the capital of Tatarstan area, which is also part of the Russian Empire. So sorry, of Russia and Russian Empire too at that point. But then, so in why Kazan? Well, August Kazan was captured by the White Army, so anti-Bolshevik forces. So this is when the White Army took charge of the gold reserve, and there was very little control over it from the center because the center was already pretty much disturbed by the war, and it wasn't easy to control the White Army. That's why Kolchak and the White Army generals decided to take the gold reserve and move it even deeper into the country. Because of that, they were basically trying to move to run away from the Bolsheviks because they were always behind them. Well, the Bolsheviks knew they needed the money, obviously. So Kolchak, we spoke a lot about Kolchak when we discussed the Russian exodus, right? It's a series of tours about the immigration of well, Russians, Jews, Georgians, right, from the former imperial territories after the revolution. I lost count to those episodes, but they are all available with the secret link. So Kolchak basically named himself, and rightly so, the chief of the um, mm, White Army movement, and also kind of the White State, so to speak, because they still consider themselves a state in a way, kind of. And when they immigrated, they considered themselves the empire in exile anyway. So Kolchak was a big role model, and he was the superior ruler, the governor, so to speak, of the white movement and the state. Eventually, in 1919, they based in the town of Omsk. This is Siberia already, and Omsk became the capital of the White State. And Kolchak considered himself something very similar to the emperor, like superior ruler or something like that. And he was supported by many. This state was recognized by Europe. It was recognized by America, and because of that, you may remember my tours of um, on the inventor of the television, right? The Zworykin, who also worked in Omsk, and from Omsk he went on business trips to the USA because there were diplomatic relations between the white government and European states. So that was, this could have been something. This could have been a very good opposition to the Red movement, but that didn't happen. And all this way, our character followed the Kipner followed Kolchak followed the army. In 1919, in the building of the museum, there was even an exhibition of what was there in the gold reserve. Apart from gold bars and cash, there was also jewelry, a lot of precious items, and Kolchak definitely took some of the gold reserve because he had a huge army to feed, to keep warm, and to house somewhere. All of that needed money, plus all those business trips from Zworykin, and they just tried to exist in a certain way. So the gold reserve was taken, and this was not an issue. Everyone knew that. It's not like Kolchak bought himself a Bentley or something. In 1919, they eventually the Red Army came, and first, they managed to capture half of the gold reserve, and the rest was taken further. And this is already 1919, end of 1919, like, I think it's September or November, when the Bolsheviks took over big part of the reserve, and now they are just, doing the calculations. Um, yeah, so they had to do it just with their hands. This is, by the way, the telegram, the actual telegram of Keeper to someone in Petrograd. So it is saying that the trophies are absolutely so difficult to count, and the gold reserve is about 650 million rubles. That is almost billion. Well, it's like billions if we convert it to modern money. Well, anyway, so this is but hold on a second. Let me just make sure. So Capel, where is that? Yes, that's Capel. You see the guy with mustache. He's standing like halfway between the land and and the car of the train. So that's Capel. They called him Capel, sorry. And he was there all the way. So in 1819, in the autumn of 1919, he also tried to fight the Bolsheviks, but they had to move, they had to flee, and eventually on Trans-Siberian Railroad, they managed to escape. Well, the Kolchak government collapsed, but the gold reserve was taken deeper down to the east in Siberia, to the town of Irkutsk, basically, which is by Lake Baikal. And there, already at that time, the was Czechoslovak Legion that was guarding the gold reserve and what was left of the White Army. And eventually, Bolsheviks reached them, and the Czechoslovak Legion was given a choice whether they just fight and kill each other, or they let them go, and Czechoslovaks could take even some money with them. And it was decided. So they opted for the second option, which I understand. And that's why when we spoke about the Russian immigration in the Czech Republic, there was one or two episodes of that chapter of the story. We spoke about the gold, well, Russia's gold reserve and the Czechoslovak banks, whether there was any Russian money invested in the Czechoslovak economy. We spoke about it. Even if it was, there wasn't really much of it. So this is the Czechoslovak Legion in the Trans-Siberian Railroad guarding what was left of the gold reserve. So eventually, it was all covered. It was all recovered. It was not captured by 1920 by the Soviet state. A lot of it, however, was lost. And there are still some people, more fans of conspiracy theories, claiming that the gold reserve, some parts of it are just, they were not spent by Kolchak, they were not captured by Bolsheviks, they were not stolen by anyone, but they are just hidden somewhere. And there are people who are still traveling along the Trans-Siberian Railroad in the towns where the White Army resided, or just passed by. They're still looking. There are even itineraries, for those who are trying to find those, follow the steps of the gold reserve. But so far, no joy. I'm not sure if it's happening nowadays, but at least 5 years ago, it was very strong and a popular thing to do on your Trans-Siberian journey. Some of my tourists did such a journey. I unfortunately never did. No, I kept putting it off and off because it takes a lot of time, and eventually I never did that, which is a bummer. Anyway, So, outcome, the majority of the imperial gold reserve ended up in the Soviet hands anyway, but big parts of it went missing, and some of it we know for sure was spent by Kolchak for the White Army needs. So Kappel, however, fought till the very end. Not far from the town of Irkutsk, Bolsheviks managed to catch up with them, and they chased what was left of um, the White Army movement, the town of Toulon. Toulon is one of the last stations in that section of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. It just looked like a small village. It's a photo from 1913, and I I have no idea what's going on there at the moment. Well, but he was killed, and he basically, well, he was wounded, and then he died a couple of days later from the wounds from the blood loss, and he was buried, well, as a hero because he was a hero. So he tried to protect the gold reserve. Uh, he was ready to protect it even with his bare hands. Well, anyway, so he died in the Civil War. He's one of those heroes, was victims of the Civil War. Anyway, but we carry on. So as you see, the buildings may not be exactly the most beautiful or unique from the point of view of architecture, but the stories and in general the vibe of this neighborhood, it's the type of the area where I would explain, but I would explain like it's maybe the upside down of St. Petersburg in a way. And this is the illusion, right, to Stranger Things, which I'm a big fan of, because we know St. Petersburg as the opulent city, brilliant, amazing architecture, palaces, and but this is the upside down of it. It's well, okay, when it is sunny, it's a little bit easier maybe to handle this. Yeah, well, many buildings have been restored and they are, let's say, painted in nice colors. Well, many of them are still just yellow, but some are not. Some are a bit more lucky, I would say, in this regards. But in general, this is the area where there are just income houses, just as income houses, no museums, no palaces, and the buildings are built just one next to another. The streets are narrow, alleyways are dark, and when it's gloomy outside, well, like in this video that was filmed already by Oleg, and some bits were filmed by me, especially in the courtyards, well, it's very depressive. It's a very depressive area. There are not so many trees, by the way. This is an issue with St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is not really the greenest city in the world. We have some really nice nature outside of the city, but within the city, we definitely lack trees. I still say we, because I still believe that I will come back, and part of me never left St. Petersburg. So I prefer to say it like this, we, us, our city, not like the city. Anyway, so this is the corner building, and it also belonged to someone, and the people would also be renting the apartments. And this is the example of well, how it was. There are two merchants that originally were just butchers, and then they started selling meat in St. Petersburg and its environs. And it just happened so their business grew, and eventually they established a big trade house, meat products, and they earned enough money and invested in the construction of the income house. Just like that. It's not because they sold so much meat that they earned enough money to buy land and buy a house. Yeah, well, they took a loan, but in order to take a loan, you also had to prove to a bank that it was worth, and it was not risky to give you a loan. So there were two of these Kuznetsov brothers, Grigory and Sergei, who supplied meat all around St. Petersburg. They had one, two, three, four, five stores, and their flagship store was on the English Avenue. And the entire building belonged to them, English Avenue 29. That's exactly what it says here on this business card. Very interesting. And these Kuznetsov brothers, they came from the serfs. So that was the unique thing, right? After the emancipation of the serfs, and the new class of people emerged, right? This merchants, and for many, it was the opportunity to escape from a village, from the poverty, from the drenching poverty, and absolute, I would say, hopelessness, and even yeah, most people living in the village, they were doomed, to live there for the rest of their life, and their children and the children of their children. So that emancipation of serfs in 1861 completely changed that, completely flipped the script for everyone. And within a decade, a lot of rich merchants mushroomed. So that's the story. But before that reform, that was absolutely impossible. Yep, that's what this house looked like before. That was the early Soviet period, and this is the photo I found in 1860s. Why? How do I know this is the 1860s? Because this was the time of the so-called thaw. We spoke about it, the times of Khrushchev, right? The times of de-Stalinization of the Russian Empire. Sorry, of of the Soviet Union, and there was they kind of stuck it's not like they let go of the leash completely, obviously not, but they just loosened it a little bit, and the young people loved it. So we have some nice photos of the creative young people, musicians, actors, and just in general, people um, enjoying the 60s, reading some formerly prohibited books, doing some formerly prohibited activities. Well, kind of something that used to be frowned on before that. So it's one of those photos. So with this vibe, with the way people look, people dress, you can say, oh yeah, those are 1960s. Those are the Seoul period. Yeah. So that's the building. And uh, with the English Avenue is it is the longest and one of the biggest streets in this neighborhood. However, there are a lot of streets that just cross it, and there's also a lot to see in there. We're definitely going to explore some of it when we wrap up with the English Avenue. And it's mostly just about the people. For example, this building, wow, it's definitely not the most beautiful one in the neighborhood, for sure. And I don't know, it's probably the ugliest one in that area, but nevertheless, here used to live one of the most renowned Russian actresses of the 19th century, Vera Komissarzhevskaya. The entire house, well, not the entire house, so sometimes one plot of, well, one house or like could belong to several people, and the same would go to plots, like plots of land. They would be just three, four owners. So Komissarzhevskaya family owned one third of the house, and they also had their apartment there. And Vera Komissarzhevskaya was an incredibly popular actress with, I would say, well, maybe not the tragic fate, but she was not happy in her family life, in her married life, and she tried to kind of find some refuge in work. And she invested all her heart and mind in work, and that immortalized her in a way in Russian in St. Petersburg. and in the minds of her contemporaries. So she wasn't happy in her marriage because her husband never really loved her, and uh, even kept seeing other women, and eventually he married her sister. That was the story. And after that, her husband killed himself because he thought he had made a mistake, and Vera would never get back to him, Vera Komersajevskaya, and she wasn't planning to, that's for sure. They had a child together though, and well, she just remained alone and was happy whenever she was on stage. She sang well, and she had a lot of admirers, but for some reason, none of it really mattered to her that much. And this is the photo with this and the previous photograph I'll show you, but were taken in this particular house. So this is the photo from this house, and this one, and this one. It was definitely the biggest apartment on the floor. In most cases, if the landowner wanted, they could live in the same house, and they would normally have the biggest apartment, the most beautiful one. And these are the photographs of the burial of Mr. Zevska. The entire St. Petersburg came to say goodbye to their favorite actress, Federica Mr. Everyone knew where she lived. She was the symbol of this neighborhood and the entire city. The other house, I was able to find some photos, and here used to live a professor, but just some photos, not much information about who used to live here, but just a nice sneak peek into the everyday life of someone long time ago. And well, this area, it was typical. A lot of professors lived here. A lot of students lived here. Obviously, professors lived way better than the students. The students would normally be renting the upper floors, or sometimes not just the apartments on the upper floors, but rooms on the upper floors because it was cheaper. The higher the apartment is, the cheaper it was because there were no elevators. I spoke about it before, so but I'm going to repeat myself, and that's why the ground floors would be for business, for shops and everything, then uh, residential area. And so the first floor and the second floor would be always the most expensive, and then it would be less and less expensive. Living in the basement was actually more expensive than living on the upper floor. Now let's just peep into the lane. And in this lane, there is this house. Actually, so we spoke about that corner building where a certain professor used to live. So next to this orange corner building where a professor lived was built this yellow house, which was extended with two more floors in the early Soviet period. I don't know the exact year, but you can see that it looks different. It was originally just a three-floor house, then one more floor, and then two more floors in the later Soviet period were added. Here used to work Peter Lesgov. Peter Lesgov is a physician, academician, biologist, and a doctor, and also the founder of the physical education in Russia in general, just physical education. And he standardized everything, and he was the one who promoted physical education in educational facilities. And eventually, his laboratory, where he first taught biology and anatomy and physiology, thanks to the help of his friends, it turned into the courses, a big educational facility. That's his study. That's his class on animal anatomy. And thanks to a generous donation from a merchant with Siberian roots, Innokenty Sibirikov. Innokenty Sibirikov was one of the richest people in the country, by the way. Um, he owned several gold mines in Siberia, but eventually, shortly before the revolution, he became a monk. Yes. But before he became a monk, he left a genuine donation to Peter Lesgov, and this is how Lesgov decided to open big courses, and first of all, courses for women, where he taught the ladies to, well, how to teach physical education and what a physical education is and how this had to be monitored and everything. So that was a big deal. That was a game changer for sure. So thanks to Sibirikov, and that's those courses for women opened in this yellow building. Eventually, there would be several other organizations that I'm not sure if they purchased or they just rented from the state. That's a good question. But there was also an orphanage in this building. There was the charity free canteen for kids coming from broken families and well broken homes and everything. So and the children would be also taken care of. Children in the streets would be taken care of. So there was a big charity chain and the chain of charity activities that was started by um, first Lesgov, and then it was just the initiative of the Society of Women of St. Petersburg. Yep. So, but let's get back to where we were. Another building on the English Avenue is this one. Again, eclectic, nothing too unusual. Here used to be a photo studio located. And it was there were several photo studios in this area for some reason. Also, in this street used to be a lot of hairdressers. There were Jewish hairdressers there too. There were uh, there were a lot of perfumery stores as well. That's just interesting how it worked. But in general, it was quite, I would say, diverse population of this area. Okay, so this is just a photograph that was printed in that workshop, just like that. Now, uh, the English Avenue is also known for its connection to this. It wasn't exactly the hippie movement. No, it wasn't really such a thing. It would be a mistake to say that English Avenue and in general this this area was no hippie. It's just not the word you would actually use with regards to the Soviet Union. That's definitely not. But we know that here used to live a lot of like free spirits, some independent minds of the community. Well, originally this, as I said, this area was made up of students, professors, teachers, creative class people, and it continued in the Soviet Union somehow even though obviously most of these apartments were turned into communal ones, and many people from the village that decided to come to Petrograd for better living would be just given an apartment here. But historically, there were a lot of philosophers who came from the English Avenue or the area around it. And we are approaching an embankment, we're approaching a canal. So if you remember, the English Avenue crosses two islands, and we are now crossing the Griboyedov Canal or Catherine's Canal. And we're gonna be exploring a little bit of what we see from here. That's the typical view. So this is how it looked normally in February, in how it looks, not look, but how it looks in February, in March. Last time the Neva River and all the other rivers froze in St. Petersburg, it was like really fully fledged, like in 2019 maybe. And then all the years that I remember after that, it would be just little bit frozen, and for most part of the year it would look just like that. So some snow, some ice, but very thin layer of ice, fortunately. So that's the view I really like. You see the church. That's an interesting story about this church, however. And also you can see some more industrial buildings. So you can see we are kind of mostly in the outskirts of the city already. So it was cheaper to live here for sure. So, and again, just it says Catherine Canal. Well, Griboyedov for Catherine Canal is one and the same name. It's just that the Griboyedov Canal is a more modern name. And in most cases, it would be called before the revolution Catherine's Canal. And you see the barges where they sold wood. So along all the embankments of the rivers in St. Petersburg, there would be a lot of barges loaded with wood, because this is how people would just keep themselves warm. It's just heating with the stove. The central heating was still like yet to come, but that's how it was. Now we're going to be talking about what we see in this area. We'll be also briefly mentioning the bridge, Alarchin Bridge. It's this name came from the corrupted, like in the 1700s, there was kind of a guard appointed as the chief of the area, and many names actually were born this way. When you have a last name of someone, and this name kind of you pass it on from one person to another, and eventually it kind of evolves into something totally different. So that's how it was called. It's just named after an official, a person who was in charge of that area. The church, the best view is definitely from the Alarchin Bridge. That's one of the monuments of one of the landmarks, one of the dominants of this area. It's called the Saint Isidore Church. Well, this one is written in English, but you had the idea. And this is an Estonian church. There used to live quite a lot of Estonians in St. Petersburg, and the Estonian community submitted the claim to the emperor, asking to give permission to build a church for their community. And the church was built, and miraculously the church was not destroyed during the Second World War. And there are some photographs of the construction period, such as raising of the bells, delivering the bells to the top. And this is the iconostasis of the Saint Isidore Church. The church is still functioning, but it's no longer the Estonian church, it's the Russian church, because the Estonian community is very, very negligible, if any, at the moment, because I'm not sure, I haven't checked, but it was just several thousand people, and there was no there was just a congregation for, and it's one of the very beautiful and quite unusually looking churches in St. Petersburg. Now, also, if we just walk across the bridges, if you walk on the Alarchin Bridge, we'll see also some other buildings that we left behind. And so we need to move a little bit forward, and I couldn't really find a good video of that, so I was using a little bit of the Google Maps as well. So if you look if you look around, so on the corner of the English Avenue, there is this very unassuming building. That's also 19th century postcard. That was the fifth gymnasium, the fifth school, and that was originally a private school for boys. It was opened with donations coming from several merchant families, and they were hired best teachers. They learned several languages, they learned sciences. They basically this was so called of the boarding school for noble boys. You know, there was a school Smolny for noble girls. This is the school for noble boys. And in the Soviet period, it just became a public school. 48 school. This is the photo from the 18th of May 1930 from Leningrad. Obviously, in the Soviet Union, the education was just a mixed gender. That was not an issue for the Soviet Union at all. Yeah, I think this is where we can wrap up with this. And technically speaking, next time we're just going to start from another island on where English Avenue goes. And yeah, so this is a logical place to wrap it up. Let me just open the chat. Let me know if you have any questions as well. And in the meantime, I'll be sharing the links with you. So in 1 hour from now, Misha is going to, wait a second. Our bot is here. Not anymore. Yes. Okay. Sorry for that. I was going to send you the link. So in 1 hour from now, Misha is going to give a talk, and I will be with him. Also talk about Leo Tolstoy. Very interesting. As you know, not only Misha focuses on the literary works, but also just private life and the personalities. Because for us, like it's all kind of inseparable. But in schools, well, we mostly paid attention to literary works. So Misha provides kind of more wholesome approach, which I like a lot. I will ask Misha to speak up next time. When you give a tour, please speak up. Okay, and sharing the links also for tomorrow. So after Leo Tolstoy, there are going to be two tours back to back. I'm taking you, there's going to be a premiere of Dostoevsky Neighborhood. It will be different from the tours we had before. Well, some areas will be overlapping just a little bit, but not the stories, because the previous tours were about Dostoevsky and how he lived, but it's going to be about his contemporaries and just the city itself, how the city lived during the times of Dostoevsky. So it's a bit different focus. And then after Dostoevsky, I'm taking you to the Yelagin Palace to talk about the mother to Nicholas II and also the palace itself, the life of the palace in the 19th century and the 20th century, and some interiors as well. And for tomorrow, two tours, which I likely to reschedule a little bit, which I am likely to put off for a later hour because of my travels, which might happen or might not happen. I don't know. I'm done with uncertainty, and it's really, really, really wears me out. Thank you so much, Mary Beth. This is very sweet of you. So I hope you have enjoyed the tour. Again, so this area is more of a kind of a laid back walk and provided with a bit more sunlight. It's definitely less depressing and less gloomy, but I try to focus on just some interesting stories. Yeah, and definitely for me, that Estonian church, Saint Isidore Church, is a highlight, that's for sure. So thank you everyone for joining me on. So you see here all the links. So for tonight and for tomorrow, the previous tours recordings are already available through my website or through my YouTube channel. You have the links to support me. You know that you can send me a PayPal donation or buy me a coffee. And there are some more tours already scheduled for the upcoming weekends, but if I travel and if I'm in Israel, I will be scheduling a lot more tours. And the reason I'm going there, well, I was supposed to guide an in-person tour, but that was rescheduled for obvious reasons, but I still have a lot of arrangements for virtual tours and Holocaust remembrance, and there will be some, premieres as well. And I'm hoping to do some more filming for my pre-recorded tours. And plus my studies, I need to renew my license every year, and I try to do it when it's still not hot, and trying to do as much as I can. So I hope it works out, and if it doesn't, well, it doesn't. That's it. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in 1 hour from now. Bye bye. And well, we'll be sharing this recording sometime.